Are you wondering how you can rent out your first home and buy a second one? Are you wondering if this is the right decision for you? Well, luckily for you, I've done this 4 times and I want to show you exactly the step-by-step process that I've taken that you can take as well to do exactly that. My name is Cody and I make videos about all things real estate and money here on the channel, and there's a couple things that you want to consider with doing this method of renting out your current home and buying a second one, but honestly, it's going to be easier than you think. Like I said, I've now done this 4 times personally in the last 5 years, and it's helped me grow my net worth to over $300,000 and create monthly net positive cash flow of over $2,600 per month. So enough about that, let's jump into it. I want to show you exactly how you can do this and how you can take the steps to help you rent out your current home and buy that second one. So what do you need to know? Well, if you've bought a home already, you probably are pretty familiar with the process and you probably have a good understanding of how this is going to go, because buying a second home is really going to be a lot like buying the first one, except for you just still have a home that you came from. Nothing really changes. I mean, perhaps you were living with family or you're living with your parents or you were renting somewhere before you bought that first place. This is going to be the same thing, except for you're going to have a little bit more flexibility because you already own the place that you're in and you're not selling it. So you can kind of be out at any time and you can really wait for that perfect deal to come up to really make that move to that second home. However, the first thing that you might be asking yourself is, well, how do I afford both mortgages? I'm going to be moving out of the home that I already own and then moving into a second one. How am I going to afford this? And how are the banks actually going to look at this situation and be able to qualify me for the new loan? So really, to explain this, we need to talk a little bit about what the banks are actually looking for. The banks are going to be looking at what they call your debt to income ratio. This is going to be a ratio that determines how much you earn on a monthly basis versus how much monthly debt you have. So they're looking at your debts over here. Let's say that you make, we're going to start with income. Let's say that you make $10,000 per month and you have monthly debts of $5,000. So this monthly debt isn't going to include things like groceries or paying your mom for something. This is only going to include stuff that is actually going onto your credit report. So this is going to include student loans, credit card debt, your existing mortgage. It could include car loans, anything like that. So they're looking at what are your monthly debts versus what is your income. So if you have a $10,000 a month income, and you have monthly debts of $5,000 a month, this gives you a debt to income ratio of 50%. 50%. Now, if you have debts of, let's say, $3,000 and you still earn the same $10,000 per month, this is going to give you a debt to income ratio of 30%. So this is really what the banks are looking for. They don't care where the money's coming from. They don't care what type of debt you have or anything like that. They just want to know what these numbers actually play out to be. So the easiest way to increase your borrowing capability is to lower your debt to income ratio. The lower the number, the better here. So when it comes to this, you either want to earn more money or you want to reduce your debts. So when it comes to qualifying for that second mortgage, let's say we're going to get rid of this, we're going to get rid of that. We're going to assume that you're still at a 50% debt to income ratio. Now this is pretty high. There are some loans out there where banks will lend up to a 50% debt to income ratio, but that's about the maximum. Occasionally you can get a little bit higher, but really you've got certain numbers that are like 30%, 43%, 50%, and then like I said, some that are a little higher. So what the bank really wants to see is, let's assume that you had you're going to rent out your existing home, and let's say that that's going to bring in $2,000 a month of income. Now, the banks are only going to let you use 75% of that. So they're going to let you use 75%, which is going to give you a new monthly income of $1,500 that you can add to that $10,000. This $1,500 is going to be added up there, and then let's say that your existing mortgage is also $1,500. So when they look at this, they're going to say, okay, you're making $2,000 a month in rent. We're going to use 75% of that because they know that you're going to have some vacancy and some repairs. You know, you're not going to keep all $2,000 in your pocket every single month. So that's why they only use 75%, which is $1,500. Your existing mortgage is also $1,500. So these basically cancel each other out, and you're still at this 50% debt to income ratio. So this is exactly how you qualify for the second home without getting into a position where you're not going to be able to qualify because your debts are too high. This income that you get from the rental of your current home will offset your debts. Now, if it comes out and let's say that you only get $1,500 a month in rent, for this here, $1,500, if I don't drop the marker, geez. Now they're only going to take 75% of that. which is going to be about, what is that? That's about like 1,100 or so. I don't know what the math is off the top of my head, but you're going to have about 1,100 there. Let's say that your mortgage is still 1,500 here. That's okay. This is going to now drop, and they're going to add $400 worth of debt, because you've got 11 here and you're going to take out 1,100 there, which leaves you $400 worth of debt still for this side. So as long as your monthly income is high enough, even with this extra debt added in, you'll still be okay. So they kind of cancel each other out, and that's really what they're looking for when it comes to qualifying for two different homes. Now, beyond that, you might be wondering, well, what type of loan can I get? The best type of loan to do this with is a conventional loan. Maybe you bought your first home with a conventional loan, maybe you bought it with an FHA loan. It doesn't really matter what you used, but in most cases, well, in all cases, you're only going to be able to have one FHA loan. So you can't go out and you can't keep getting multiple FHA loans. The banks will require you to go to a conventional loan if you already have one FHA. So if you bought your first home with FHA, you're going to have to go conventional on the second one. But if you bought your first home with a conventional loan, you can go and get an FHA loan on that second property. There are a couple of pros and cons to each of the different loan types, which I'm not going to get into here in this video, but I just wanted to kind of describe some important features that you'll want to know. Most importantly, FHA loans, they do have a lower down payment requirement, but they have mortgage insurance that lasts for the life of the loan. So some older FHA loans used to have that mortgage insurance drop off after a certain number of years. However, that's no longer the case. That mortgage insurance now will stay on the property or stay on the loan for the life of the loan itself. And also, FHA loans are going to have slightly looser lending requirements, so they'll usually allow a little bit higher debt to income ratio, and they're a little bit more flexible on things like your credit score. Whereas conventional, yeah, it's usually a little bit better of a deal in my opinion, because yeah, you're going to have to pay more of a down payment, generally 5% or higher, but you will be able to drop off that mortgage insurance a little bit later, and the banks will have a little bit more confidence in you in giving you these loans because you're going to have better lending guidelines, especially if you've got good credit and you've got a higher down payment. Conventional is generally the way that I would recommend you should go. Now, one of the next questions you might be asking is, well, what if I have a lot of equity in my current home? What can I do to tap into that? Because if I'm not selling the property, how do I use some of that money for a down payment or to help cover costs, or maybe even to furnish the new house, or whatever you want to do with the money? My recommendation, again, is to get a home equity line of credit, also called a HELOC, and use that to be able to pull some cash out. This basically gives you a line of credit against the equity in your house. The bank will look at it, they'll determine an appraised value on the home, they'll subtract out what you owe on your first mortgage, and then they'll loan you up to a certain amount as a line of credit. So this gives you a great way to get easy access to cash. You can pay it back at any time, you can pull money from it at any time, and it's just a great all-around option. The interest rates generally are slightly higher, so you want to make sure you watch out for that, but it's really not too big of a deal, especially when it gives you easy access to this cash, and you can really put money into it to pay it down or pull it back out when you need it. It's one of my favorite financial tools, actually. The second option is going to be to do a cash out refinance. You want to make sure that you do this while you're living in the property. The reason being, if you're not living in the property, if you've already bought the second home, you won't be able to pull out as much cash because now the banks are going to be looking at it as an investment property. So they view it as a little bit more risky because if the market turns and you get into a bad spot, that rental property is going to be the property that you let go first, not the one that you're actually living in. So when banks look at that, they want to make sure that you're living in the home. You can do the cash out refinance to pull out some of that equity. And the thing that you should be aware on this is you're going to reset the life of your loan. So you might be paying a little bit more interest, you might pay less interest, but you're basically resetting the loan because you're getting a new one. So there's a couple things to look out for there, but it's also a great way to get access to some cash and capital so you can then use that to go and purchase your next home. The other thing that I do want to recommend on this is if you do a cash out refinance or you pull money from a HELOC, make sure that you have enough money coming in from the potential rent once you get to that point. Make sure that it will rent for enough that you're not going to be coming out negative cash flow every single month. You don't want to have a $1,500 mortgage and then only have the place rent for $1,200. That's going to get you into a bad spot, especially if something bad happens, like you lose your job or the economy turns around or you have a month of vacancy, or the tenant doesn't pay. Those things will come up eventually, and you don't want to have negative cash flow in that situation. So just make sure that you've got enough. You want to rent it for, let's say, $1,700, and your total expenses for the property are, let's say, $1,500 or $1,400. You want to have at least a couple months, at least a couple $100s per month of positive net cash flow when you do this. Now, talking about looking for that second home, I would recommend looking at something like a duplex or even a home with a mother-in-law. Look for something that's unique, especially if you want to repeat this process over and over. You want to get into something that can provide a good investment for many years to come. If you're looking at doing this once, you might be looking at doing it 2 or 3 or 4 or maybe 5 times. So make sure you look at the options for what you have to buy a duplex or something with a mother-in-law apartment, and perhaps you could even rent out one side or rent the basement or rent out the accessory dwelling unit, whatever it looks like, to help supplement your income and build that rental portfolio faster. You could also even consider looking into something that could make for a great Airbnb. So for instance, in my area, a lot of people come here to ski during the winter. So a property that I would look at is something that's close to the canyons and has all of the amenities that a skier would be looking for if they're out here on a ski trip. Those are going to be things that I would be looking for in a property, because I know that if I move out of that home at some point in the future, I can Airbnb it or I can rent it out long term, and I've got a great property to add to my portfolio. So when you do finally make that second purchase, you're probably thinking, okay, now this is done, what do I need to do with my old home? Do I need to make any changes, notify anybody of anything? And the answer is no. You don't really need to do anything with that, except for this one thing. You need to change your insurance policy to a landlord policy instead of a homeowner's policy. There's some different coverages between the two policies, and you want to make sure you have a landlord policy in place so that if somebody gets hurt on your property and you get sued, you've got some protection against that. So that's really the only thing you need to do. You need to change your insurance policy, and that's pretty much it. You don't need to change the type of loan. You don't need to notify the bank. They don't really care as long as the payment keeps getting made. And one last thing that's worth mentioning here is that if you're buying a new home, the bank is going to want to see, or at least want to ask you, that you have the intention upon living there for at least 1 year. They want to make sure that you're not going in and saying, oh, I'm going to buy this house and live there, but you're really buying it as an investment. So they do ask you, hey, are you going to live there for at least 1 year? There will be some verbiage in there that's saying, hey, you can't move out unless there's extenuating circumstances, like if you had a death in the family or a divorce or something happened, there was a major life event, then of course you can move out of the property before that 1 year is up. But they want to just kind of make sure that you're actually intending to live there in the first place. Now, all things being said, they're not going to find out if you didn't, but it is on your moral standing to be honest about what your intentions are with the property. But they're not going to send anybody to your door to say, hey, how long have you lived here? Or where did the owner go? They only moved out after 9 months or something like that. They're really just asking you to answer in good faith that it is in fact your intention to live in that home for at least 1 year. So you'll want to know that, especially if you're looking to repeat this process multiple times over. And that's the last thing worth mentioning, is that you can repeat this process over and over. Like I said, I've done this 4 times, and it's been an absolutely life changer for me to be able to do this. This is, in my opinion, the fastest way to grow your net worth and to continue investing in real estate, especially if you're in an expensive area. If you're in California or New York or even some of these other areas that are getting a lot more expensive, this is a great opportunity to do that with a low down payment. Also, if you guys live in Utah, get in touch with me. I'd love to walk you through this process personally, help you buy that second home, help you know what a good investment looks like, and just kind of help you through this process, since I've been through it a few times. I've helped a number of clients here do that. I'm a realtor here, and I've helped them make that same decision. So with that being said, guys, thanks for watching. Give me a thumbs up here on the video if you like this content. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Click that button down below and that bell to get notified when I release new videos. I hope this was helpful for you. I'll catch you in the next one.